Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Special Envoy of the President of the Republic of Indonesia for Climate and Energy, Bapak Hashim Djojohadikusumo. And welcome to the Deputy Speaker of the People's Consultative Assembly of the Republic of Indonesia, Bapak Eddy Soeparno. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we now move to our third plenary session of the day, which addresses the most critical opportunities of our time. And the session is titled, How Can Indonesia Leverage the Green Sectors to Boost Growth? This dialogue, once again, will explore strategies to transform environmental challenges into powerful engines for economic expansion and climate resilience. Without further ado, to lead this session, it is my pleasure to welcome onto the stage our moderator, the Secretary General of the Global Alliance for a Sustainable Planet, Mr. Satya Tripathi. Please give a round of applause.
Thank you, and good morning to all of you. We have a very exciting panel discussion on something of critical importance, not just to Indonesia, but the broader region and the world as a whole. And I say this because I've been in Indonesia in the past multiple times. My first time was when I was appointed to be the UN Recovery Coordinator for the tsunami, helping the government of Indonesia, working with the people on the nearly $8 billion tsunami recovery program with the minister who was my counterpart then, Dr. Kuntoro Mangkusubroto. And then subsequently I came back as the head of UN ORCID, the UN Office for REDD+ Coordination, which was set up by the Secretary General. And the Secretary General was so invested in it that he personally came down to Indonesia to open the office. It was Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. And that we have seen how Indonesia produced one of the world's best examples in forest conservation and reducing deforestation at system scale. And to discuss how green growth can be really not an obstruction, not a problem, but a strategy that Indonesia can literally run with, given all the best practices it has spawned for the world to learn from, it is my pleasure to invite our esteemed panelists to please come on stage. Given that we have little time for such an important conversation, I would not spend any in introducing the luminaries who are on stage today. You know all of them, and so let's save the time to have a serious conversation about green growth and how Indonesia can play a central role, not just for itself, but for the planet as a whole. Now, when we talk about a green economy, it is often postulated that a green economy runs counter to economic growth as we know it. We also know that is not true. These are what we call false narratives, that if you want growth, then you will have to dispense with environment, you have to dispense with climate, you have to dispense with clean air and clean water. That's not true. There are enough examples around the world where we have seen that green growth can go hand in hand, and actually it can aid and abet. Let me share a little statistics with you here. If you take the steel industry, the automotive industry, the IT and the IT-enabled services industry, add all of them together, they have about 32 million jobs globally. Just that. The biggest employers in the world. Smallholder agriculture, and I talk about it because oil palm is a big story in Indonesia. It's the largest producer in the world. There are 600 million smallholders in the world. That's the biggest avenue for employment if we can create the right template for them to be sustainable, to be productive, and while doing that, to be environmentally sensitive and protecting nature and all the natural heritage and ecosystems that Indonesia is famous for. With that, I want to start with Hashim. The speech of Prabowo in Davos, and I was privileged to be watching it there, came as a big contrast. I'm not using this as a totem pole to say others were not right and Prabowo was right, but if you look at the other big speeches, Chancellor Merz and Prime Minister Carney and President Macron and President Trump and everybody else, it was more about geopolitics than about people, about poverty, about doing what people might see as valuable. And President Prabowo's speech was replete with ideas more about people, more about the country, more about ecosystems. And so I was quite touched by that. So I think it'll be very useful for our audience to get a sense of what the government is thinking and how does it want to use green growth, not just as a parallel conversation, but as something mainstream. Over to you, Pa.
Right. Satya, thanks very much. I think to be fair to Prime Minister Carney and other Western leaders in Davos, I think they were distracted. They were distracted by Greenland, by Venezuela, and those other matters. So to be fair, but Prabowo in September when he was at the General Assembly, and I was there in the General Assembly with him, he did mention that it's the Indonesian government's intention to reforest 12.7 million hectares of degraded lands, degraded forests. So that is it's a big game changer. And just to illustrate that, he's walking the talk, as the Americans say. It's just not omon, yeah? It's not, Indonesians say omon. It's not omon, he's really walking the talk. He's announced, in fact, I was there once on his behalf and I was in London, that first of all, wildlife conservation, nature-based solutions, it's all intertwined, yeah? And to prove the point, we announced in London 2 weeks ago that the Indonesian government is going to allocate 120 million US dollars, or 2 trillion rupiahs, for the conservation and development, maintenance of the Waikambas Nature Reserve in Lampung. This is, Waikambas is a conservation area for elephants, for the endangered Sumatran rhinoceros, and other endangered species. So this is walking the talk. This is putting real Indonesian money, this is not donor money, into the conservation, preservation, and development of very important nature conservation area. This had a major impact. His Majesty King Charles was at the event. He came at the event obviously this So this is just one example of where we are walking the talk, okay? Another small but significant measure was the fact that Prabowo has decided, the Indonesian government has decided, that we have, at the moment, 5,000 forest rangers. In Indonesian, we say polisi khusus kehutanan, polsus kehutanan. These are forest rangers. From 5,000 to protect 57 national parks is an impossibility. We know that, previous governments have known that. Prabowo has decided now to increase the forest rangers from 5,000 to 70,000 forest rangers. This will be sufficient for the moment to protect our national parks, our protected forests, all these things which are very vital to the continuation of our, basically of our planet. Yeah? And why? Because apparently, in the last 10 to 15 years, 4 million hectares of protected forests and national parks have been illegally occupied by palm oil plantations planted by recalcitrant, let's say, let me say naughty businessmen. Because these national parks were not protected, willfully or unwillfully unprotected. So this is just two examples of Prabowo and the government's real intent to protect the environment. So I think all of you already know, it's been announced several times, I think the government mentioned that we are going to start a major electric generation program consisting of many projects. This is what they call in Indonesia the REUPTL, this is electricity program. For the next 10 years, it's been announced that 70 gigawatts will be built. Many of them, most of them maybe from companies such as Mazda. These are green projects, renewable energy projects, 76% of which will be from the likes of Mazda and others. This, again, is another, I think, a very strong show of the government's direction. On top of that, the government has decided also to embark on 7 gigawatts of nuclear power. This is new. This is completely new. 500 megawatts initially, over time until 2034, it'll be 7 gigawatts of nuclear power. A lot of countries have shown intent to come in and participate in the investment, or also selling technology and so forth. Again, that is another strong show of commitment to, whilst it's not nature-based solution, but it is green, it is let's say, carbon neutral energy. The rest will be provided by natural gas, which we in all, I think, all parties consider this a transition fuel, but this is the intent and it's already been broadcast. I can talk for hours and hours on this, but I'm very cognizant of that I have 5 other colleagues here about to speak. So I think just to show the intent, yeah, and this is going to be real money to protect the national parks. That's 120 million for Waikambas. Again, also there's a place called Pesongan, which is in Aceh. 90,000 hectares of Prabowo's personal land, forest, to be for elephant conservation. This is really walking the talk, Satya.
Thank you, Pa. I think what you have presented is, and I'm sorry we don't have more time because the audience would have really loved to get a front seat to what the government's thinking is in terms of nature, and it's so inspiring because having traveled the world and worked with hundreds of governments, I can say with a high level of confidence that Indonesia really comes out on top, not in just in terms of its thinking in protecting nature, but actually doing it over the years. Please, Pa.
Okay, just one last small detail. When we were in London, Prabowo, the government announced revoking the licenses of 28 companies. 28 companies. Now, he's also said that he doesn't want a miscarriage of justice, so he's reviewing some of the cases because some of the cases, there seems to be some sort of a middle ground here. It's a very gray whether they actually violate or not. But The intent is very clear. And I was there when standing next to His Majesty King Charles, almost to a man and to a woman. With this action was universally praised. Universally praised. They didn't expect such quick action, very decisive. And there again is the expression of intent. Satya.
Absolutely. Turning to you, Eddy, the executive has grand plans of protecting while growing. How do you see the parliament as aligned in support of the president's vision? And of course, we know there's separation of powers. You have a mind of your own. So I think the audience would really like to know how the government and the legislature are working lockstep in advancing the broader global agenda.
Thank you. First of all, I think it should be noted that from an energy point of view, over the past 5 years, we have seen a disorderly energy transition. So we see the energy mix on the renewables has grown, but also the increase of production and consumption of oil, especially natural gas, as well as coal. And in this region where we are, China is the key driver of energy. China has increased its coal-fired capacity by 80 gigawatts only last year, and including also the use of natural gas. However, thankfully, China has also increased its capacity on renewables. So as we stand today, I think China has 4,000 gigawatts of energy capacity, of which 2,200 gigawatts is renewable. So the increase of China in using renewables, especially wind and as well as solar, has been incredible. In fact, they have reached their capacity of 1,200 gigawatts of solar and wind 6 years ahead of time. So this is an encouraging trend. In the case of Indonesia, it is also very encouraging, as Hashim has rightfully mentioned, that our intent to increase our renewable energy capacity by 52 gigawatts within a 10-year time frame is also a big task at hand. But again, we should develop our energy going forward with the intent of having energy security, energy resilience as our primary objective. So everything else will be based on that. And the energy mix going forward, we know we have a huge amount of solar capacity, about 3,300 gigawatts. We're the second largest country in the world that has geothermal potential. I understand that it's scattered all over the place. Not everything can be developed, but we have this huge potential. We have a lot of renewable energy potential. However, in the case of renewable, it is always not the curse, but it's always the drawback of intermittency that we have to deal with. So that's why I fully agree with Hashim's note, just that we need to develop new energies. One is in the form of nuclear. So to get back to your question, I think how we support it is to fully agree on the energy policy going forward. And this has been agreed upon. So I was chairman of the energy policy that was discussed between Parliament and the government. And we have already agreed on the new energy policy, which then resulted in the new energy development policy for 2025 to 2034. And we will support these policies by way of issuing the necessary legislation. The renewable energy bill, the revision of the electricity bill. We will also revise the oil and gas bill, as well as I have personally pushed forward for the issuance and the discussions of a climate action bill. As of today, we have an environmental bill, but since climate action, climate impact is a key issue and it's impacted Indonesia and the world as a whole, I think it's very important for us to have a legislation that will focus on the impact of climate change, as well as how we can overcome this issue. So we will support the initiatives of the government in terms of renewable energy transition, as well as getting climate action in place.
Thank you, Eddy. And I think that's a nice segue to you, Mattia. you've been at the ECB, you've been at the Global Green Growth Institute, and now you're at the Grantham Institute, and with that wide range of experience, how do you think Indonesia can pull this off, make green growth the tool for an exponential economic transition for its people and the broader region?
Well, thank you very much, Satya. It's a very good question. I love thinking about the future. We look now 10 years back, and we see 10 years of thinking about green growth. And then we look forward, and we think, what are the next 10 years going to look like? We know they're going to look drastically different. The value I can add to this conversation is bring a little bit the global perspective from the research we do at the London School of Economics, the work we do at Systemic. We have a good vision on how things are going to change. So I would say we're going to see 4 things that are going to be drastically different in green growth in the next decade from last decade. First of all, and many talked about it, thinking about adaptation and resilience will change. We think about adaptation and resilience as protection, but fundamentally that protection is for profits and growth. Resilience is about protecting companies' profits and growth. And so increasingly, investment in resilience have to be understood as investments in growth and productivity. Without those, growth and productivity will slow down. And in a country like Indonesia, where you have very aggressive targets for growth, resilience needs to play a fundamental part in that. That's the first thing. The mindset will need to change. The second one, we are going to see this transformation driven by cost curves and technologies in the low carbon space go hand in hand with another fundamental transformation, which is going to be driven by AI. So my prediction is in the next 10 years, the conversation will not be about AI consuming lots of power, will be about how do we use AI to accelerate the low carbon transition? How can AI be applied to make the transition faster and better? I think that will be the focus, and that will require intentionality on the application of AI. We've written about this with Nick Stern in Nature earlier this year about this need for intentionality in the application of AI. Today, AI is very helpful to make us buy a new pair of trousers on Instagram, but how do we apply that power to make solar more efficient, to make accessibility to EVs faster and so on? So that's a second trend that I see changing drastically. The third one is about the fact that we've been talking about climate and green growth in global fora, in very abstract terms. But we need to make green growth real for people and places. This needs to mean something which is directly impacting people's lives. What does this mean? It means that the low-cost renewables need to trickle down to lower bills for people. Resilience needs to be opportunities for jobs. So we need to translate that global debate into things that actually have an impact on people and places. And nowhere like Indonesia, this will need to be true. And my fourth point of thinking about how the 10 years will look very different in terms of green growth is that we are going to be in a world that will see geopolitical crosswinds that will continue. And so how do we navigate in the right direction? We know the direction is set by the economics of cost curves, by the productivity of the new low-carbon technologies. How do we keep that direction of travel while these crosswinds push us in different direction and geopolitics pushes us in different direction? This is about navigated vested interests, both domestically but also internationally, in a way that doesn't make us lose that course of action. How do we do that? We need to change narratives. We need to make narratives relevant to competing interests and priorities that will drive politicians' minds. So all of these four things, Sachi, from resilience as growth to AI and climate as a fundamental bionome that needs to work together, making green growth real for people and places, and navigating these crosswinds, to me, are the agenda for policymakers in Indonesia and in other countries that have the ambition of Indonesia for growth.
Thank you, Mattia. I think I really like the point you made about intentionality. It's like taking a high-precision tool to sharpen a pencil. We don't need that. AI has real competence, real ability to do things that are beyond humans, given a certain time and a timeline or a deadline. So it can fasten thinking, it can aid and abet constructive thinking, rather than we being stuck in minimalistic use of a very high precision tool. So I really like the point you made about intentionality, because the question about where the power will come from and where the water will come from is a real question as we go along. And I'm so glad Pa Hashim and Pa Eddy made that point of increasing power availability in Indonesia in an exponential way as compared to now, is also going to position Indonesia in that AI marketplace. So I think that's phenomenal, but it will all need billions and billions of dollars. Fatima, how can you help?
I'm glad that you thought of me when you thought of the billions of dollars. Thank you for this, and I'm very happy to be on this distinguished panel. For a quick, for those of you who don't know Masdar, we come from the UAE. I would say we're a humble company that started 20 years ago in the renewable energy development and investment, and today a very proud partner of Indonesia in supporting it to contribute to the fast growth of renewable energy and to meet its demand that it has a very fascinating trajectory of growth to come. I would say that, from my, modest experience in the country now, it's been fascinating to see the great strides that Indonesia has taken in terms of being able to not only meet the expectations of private investors. The country has become more and more open to foreign investors coming in, and Masdar being here is one evidence of that. I would say another one is having set clear, consistent targets. Hashim mentioned the 70 gigawatts of new energy to come in. And that is a very ambitious goal that we all have to be targeting to help this great country meet its ambitions, and also to see where we can bridge between public and private, which is very important. So I represent the private investment on this panel, and I can say that we can definitely bring in the innovation, the execution that is needed to be able to fast track between lessons learned, best practices that we see, for example, in the Middle East and in the GCC, all the way here to Southeast Asia and specifically to Indonesia. To be able to, as an investor, when we look into markets, we look into policy stability, we look into a clear renewable energy roadmap, and more importantly, a long-term government commitment. And these are all three things that we see in Indonesia, and hence why we've been here for the past 7 years, and we want to continue to be here as well. We have an ongoing partnership with PLN on the Cirata project, which is an operational floating solar plant, and that is, a very important testament of what we can do together if we focus on a successful and a healthy partnership that has community in its mindset, also sustainability and long-term profitability, right? It's very important that eventually we look at profitability and the return on investment for the partnership and for the country. I think looking at the balance between what the public finance can also play a role. Public finance should be able to absorb more risk. That puts, governments are able to target high risk, high payoff technologies, and private investment can focus on execution, on delivery, and also on being able to bring expertise to the country. I think that also helps in reducing the pressure on the private capital, because there's always this immediate expectation of meeting shareholder returns, whereas on public finances, you have a bit more longer tenure compared to private capital. So I think that is very important. When we come from the UAE, we're able to bring also not only the know-how and expertise, but also share the same, culture and struggles that we started from as the UAE. 55 years ago, the UAE was a very small country when we began, and today, fast forward, because of the steadfast leadership that we have in the country, we are where we are today, and we want to be able to extend a helping hand to friendly countries where we can share the same vision, and also be able to put that into action, right? And I think from a Masdar perspective, we are the arm of the government that puts that into action. We can execute these projects. We're able to move fast. we're able to access capital, we're able to think as a government as well, understand the constraints that sometimes private sector might not fully understand, and I think most importantly, be part of the community, right? I think that's really important.
Thank you, Fatima. I think the two things that really resonate with me is, the first is building virtuous partnerships between public finance and private finance, Public finance taking a long-term view of what's important for the country, what's good for the people, and private finance then crowding in to fill in a major gap, what public finance can't. And the second thing about UAE, I mean, if you're looking for ambition, ladies and gentlemen, you need to look no further than UAE. It's in the middle of nowhere. They hadn't even found oil, and if you're thinking about oil, it's only in Abu Dhabi, not in all the Emirates. Look at Dubai. It attracts, real estate prices are more expensive than New York or London or Paris, you name the cities of the world. It's just built on ambition and execution, not just ambition. Ambition is very fuzzy, doesn't work for people if it isn't really grounded. Anindya, coming to you, how do we make it all grounded, Because you're one of the biggest groups in the country, and you have your fingers in multiple pies. How are you looking at green growth as a new investment? Like, we're talking about new energy, new ideas. How is the private sector thinking in terms of new ideas and green growth?
First of all, thank you for the question, and congratulations, Pak Arsyad, Pak Frankie, and Pak Sofyan Jalil for making this a very good forum. So we like that, and we will definitely support. And number two, I would like to focus on your statement earlier, Satya, that essentially green growth is not parallel, but part and parcel of the national growth story. So I want to say three things. Number one, green growth is a growth story. And number two, green growth is energy transition story. And number three, I think green growth is a geopolitical story. Let me go one by one quite quickly.
Please.
Why I think it is a growth story? Because I think it will create investments, trades, industrializations, and at the end of the day, jobs. That's what the country needs. And when we look deeper into this growth story, for Indonesia, we got to choose where we want to play. It's a big supply chain and ecosystem. I think two things come to mind. One, electrification, and number two, minerals downstreaming. Now, electrification is about 40% of what the opportunities lie in this green growth story. And not many people know, but do you know that 15% of new cars being sold in Indonesia today is already EV today? Of course, China, 90%, maybe Europe, 60%. And this creates a whole new set of industry and its ecosystem, right? And a lot of the players, especially the Chinese, they are making the facilities over here. So electrification is certainly one thing that can drive this growth. And the second thing is the critical minerals downstreaming. Now, people talk about nickel, 60% of the world's production happen here, but also don't forget about the cobalt, copper, and also bauxite. 10% of the production is happening here. And this happened a lot in the eastern part of Indonesia, so you can also bring equitability in the growth of Indonesia. Now, number two, I think it is also energy transition story, right? I think my friend here from LSE mentioned that AI and therefore data center is big. We predict that in the next, I would say, 25 to 35 years on the way to net zero, we need about 100 gigawatt of power for data center alone, right? So the initiative, like what Pak Hashim mentioned, Pak Eddy mentioned, that PLN is embarking on the 75 gigawatt, 75% of it coming from renewable energy is big. And I think we very much support that. And also, to go from this downstreaming of critical minerals, if I jump back, we need about 500 probably gigawatt in the next 25 to 35 years of solar energy. And therefore, with the silica being held in the country, natural resources as well. That's a big opportunities for all of us to embark on. And lastly, on the geopolitical side, I think this is a geopolitical at its best. When you go to international forum, whether that's Davos, whether bilateral like APEC or G20, you can already sense out of the two superpowers, which superpowers really talk a lot about this energy transition. And certainly in this case, out of US and China, today is China. So Indonesia has to think very carefully how to play the game while at the same time having people from the Middle East to support us with, for example, the funding. Now, this thing at the end, I want to say, I really support the initiative from the government and the president with Danantara, because this initiative really crowd in investors, right? And at least it is a way to de-risk a lot of the investors coming in, because we need a lot of money. The money that Bloomberg NEF predicted is about 3.9 trillion by 2050 or 2060. So that's a lot of money. So anyhow, Indonesia being a free and non-aligned country is playing it the best we can. At Kadin, Chambers of Commerce and Industry, we're supporting the government to also opening up channels, whether to EU, to Canada, to BRICS countries, to make sure that when we go to the growth story, which is a green growth story, which is a growth story, we can also make sure that we see alignment in this collaborations with other countries to be a part of the supply chain.
Thank you, Pa. I think you made a very valid point on Danantara. It's for the first time you see the government thinking like the private sector. Private sector does it all the time. They're merging, they are hiving off different divisions into new companies to unlock value. But it's the first time you see at system scale the government putting together all its crown jewels to unlock value as a $1 trillion plus entity. So that's I think bodes very well for unlocking value of the public sector in terms of building partnerships that Fatima mentioned. Ibu Elim, APP has been kind of a pioneer in, when everybody was talking about it, and I'm going back 15 years in time, when I was heading UN ORCID, and APP was at the forefront of that sustainability conversation. How has it played out? And how do you see it moving forward? Not just APP being sustainable for itself or the ecosystem, but also helping others with the best practices it has learned. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Satya. So I want to start with just now Mattia said that sustainability is talk about the growth and profitable company. So I will say APP, why we stand in the front is basically, of course, to drive the economy, we need to see the market opportunity. And then we know that the global issue, going all the market already demand. And that's why from maybe APP, because of our product is very near to the nature base. So that's why it's really important when we make the move, right, in the beginning, and then how to make it properly. So in 2013, when we made the commitment and then bringing all our supply chain to stop deforestation and made a commitment, and I think during the implementation for the more than 10 years, we realized that it's not enough only for the supply chain. And seeing all the opportunity, the push for the decarbonization, so all our sustainability roadmap vision is not only seeing the downstream, upstream, but how we can combine and bringing our customer to be in the journey. So last year we launched our new sustainability platform we call Regenesis. I think the main point of the Regenesis, we want to bring the whole value chain. It's not only a supply chain, but it's really important we have to collaborate together. And then to bring all the investment to bring the green growth for the country, we cannot work by ourselves. And then a lot of customer demand for the green product. It's not only, even our company already mixed with the renewable almost 60%, but it's not enough because of our customer, more than 150 countries, and then especially from the EU, North America, demand of the very detailed carbon footprint per product. So we cannot only see for the overall in general, but the demand already there. And then we want to grab the market opportunity. That could be contribute back to the country green growth. And of course, going in that position is not easy. As an implementation, as a business player, of course, we've been supported by the government for the policy. I know last year I was with you, Pak Hashim, during the announcement of the President Decree of the carbon, which is open up. This is the new hope for the private sector. But I know it's not stopped there. It's a lot of work on the ground. It's really have to careful and detail to make a decision because our APP is not small company, and then we are ongoing process how to address all the decarbonization combined between nature-based solution and also the downstream decarbonization. The alternative, how to find the cost compatible. As a business, we have to also think about the cost. This is a market. So it's a very thorough, detailed plan have to be prepared. So the Regenesis will talk about the beyond 2030, going to 2050. What would be the choice? What would be the alternative and addressing all the market demand? So I think as a business player, it's the time to think about the long term. We have a motto from our founding member, Pak Frankie Vijay, is we have to, together, we can go far, fast, and beyond. Far means we have to think far to make sustainable for the business. And then fast, you have to move fast. Fast means you have to align, and if with this agile of the world, we have to fast move and to be resilient as a business. And of course, beyond. That's why we always have to think beyond. Before 2030 arrive, we have to think what's beyond 2030. How we want to start our strategy. So I think the thinking of the business, we always have to step back if we want to upgrade our strategy. And then mapping again about the geopolitics is really important to align with the business, how to make it more resilient and more sustainable.
Thank you, William. I think what you said makes very good sense, because the future is now. If you plan for the present, then when you are in the future, the baseline has shifted. And Mattia made that point very emphatically. You have to look into the future of the next 10 years, where the geopolitics is headed, where the market is headed, and plan for it now. Now, Hashim, when I met you more than a decade ago, you gave me a master class on carbon. It's the first time I had met anyone who understood so much about biochar and what a market opportunity it presents, Now you are in charge. How is the carbon market going to play out for Indonesia? Because if you look at EU, the EU ETS is more than $1 trillion market already. Of course, it's internal trading, and they're creating borders like CBAM for others to have to meet to their standards. But Indonesia has a huge opportunity here. So tell us a little more about how carbon market, the way you see it, is not just a signal, but a destination that can really change the country. Thank you, Pa.
Thank you, Satya. I'm glad you mentioned this because I thought I didn't have enough time earlier to mention this. But this is actually what's happened in the last few months is really a breakthrough. The government has implemented, already announced what's Presidential Decree, Perpres 110/2025, which has established by law now a carbon market, actually welcoming the presence and activity of, let's say, verifiers like Vera, like Puro, I think Gold Standard and the like. This was actually a breakthrough. This happened in November. End of October. I announced this, I mentioned this at a meeting in the COP30 in Sao Paulo, not in Belém, but in Sao Paulo. And reception from, I think, the international community, the carbon community, was overwhelmingly enthusiastic. And why so? Because the previous administration, and for whatever reasons, actually stalled on this for, dare I say, 10 years, since 2015. And I think this is to do with Article 6, 6.2, 6.4. And this happened because there was a concerted effort in the government and working together with NGOs to actually draft a presidential decree allowing a really workable carbon markets mechanism. And I noticed some people here in the audience who actually helped, yeah? I mean, Pak Darsono and, yeah, Ibu ST, yeah? Misha, no, okay, sorry, Misha. And the team, your team really actually helped. So, I mean, it was a really incredible joint effort, right, by a lot of young people, dare I say, much younger than me, who actually got this done. So this is, again, a game changer. This is not omon, you know. We've been omon for 10 years, and now it's real. So thank you very much for asking, because this is it's a game changer, and it's going to allow the entry of tens of billions of dollars actually to be invested in Indonesia's nature-based solutions. So
Thank you, Pa.
Thank you for the question, and I think this is something that's maybe a little looked, yeah? I mean, not much noticed by the wider community, but I think within the carbon community, very much a game changer.
Thank you, Pa. I think, as you rightly said, it's easily $10 billion plus opportunity for getting money to the people, right? Actually, at the grassroots, building prosperity at the bottom of the pyramid. We have unfortunately run out of time, but I would like each of our panelists to have 30 seconds to comment on how do we leverage the carbon market for prosperity at the bottom of the pyramid in Indonesia. Quick 30-second each one. We'll start with you, Elim. Yes.
Okay, so for me, the solution is, I agree, should be go to the ground root. So it's not only profit for the company, but looking for the long term, we have to make it everybody, including especially the community prosperity. So that's really the core and important, because of when they're living, their livelihoods fulfill, that will bring sustainable not only for the company, but also for the country. Yes.
People should benefit.
Yeah, carbon should be benefit for the community.
Carbon market is one thing, but having companies reduce their carbon emissions, that's the ultimate target. A carbon market is only a tool for it. So I think we should stress on the importance of having carbon emission reductions as an effort to that. We can get the carbon market to finance green growth, but at the end of the day, it's carbon emissions reduction that should be our ultimate objective.
Have a holistic view of the whole matter. Fatima.
I would say that carbon policy is trending towards the widespread adoption of green technologies. So from our perspective as Masdar, we believe that, we strongly believe in the long-term socioeconomic fundamentals of renewable energy.
Anindya.
I think carbon market is a good signal, but not an end in and of itself, like what Pa Eddy is saying. It has to be embedded in trade, industrial, and energy policy. But I want to note that this green growth has been a good growth story for the country, because if you look at the FDI, I believe about 25 to 30% is coming to green growth as of today, and it will only grow. So I think we just have to stay course and focus on it and execute. Yeah.
Thank you. Mattia.
So the question is, how can we make carbon markets work for people? And I think one thing that is going to transform this space is, again, technology. The ability of technology to monitor the actual carbon reductions that are achieved by people in those nature-based services has been transformed by AI and technology. And I think that will empower people to show that they can do it, and money will flow to them.
Thank you, Mattia. Last word, Pa Hashim.
I think I've said enough.
That's very good last words, Pa. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Big hand to our amazing panel. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please give applause once again to our moderator, Mr. Satya Tripathi, and our esteemed and, of course, honorable panelists. And may we request for you to please remain on stage. For next, we are to present a token of appreciation on behalf of the Indonesian Business Council. And next, it is my honor to invite onto the stage to present the token of appreciation the Chairman and CEO of Sinarmas Agribusiness and Food, Bapak Frankie Osman Wijaya, to please come up onto the stage to present the token of appreciation. And next, may we invite to please take a group photo on this momentous and prestigious occasion